A major political scandal just rocked the socialist mayor of New York, all as one of his staff members has been ordered deported by a judge. We're about to see how not one, but two controversies paint a picture of a mayor under siege, both in terms of his personal life, exposing deeply troubling sympathies at home, and his political agenda, suffering embarrassing defeats in court. Stick with me to the very end of this video because you're about to see the Mamdani administration in a completely different light, and it may indeed spell his decisive end. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. We've got a major scandal breaking out that's absolutely rocking the Zoran Mamdani administration. As it turns out, his wife, the First Lady of New York City, has a bit of a penchant for celebrating the October 7th massacre, calling people the N-word and using a homophobic slur, and frequently posting her admiration of suicide bombers and plane hijackers. I'm not even remotely exaggerating. The New York City mayor, Kami Mamdani, is facing a growing firestorm over his wife, 28-year-old Syrian-American illustrator Rama Douaji, after a Washington Free Beacon investigation using facial recognition technology to link her accounts unearthed a very disturbing pattern of social media posts across her old X and Tumblr profiles. In 2017, she posted a photo of Leila Khaled, a member of the U.S. designated terrorist organization, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who carried out 2 airline hijackings, echoing Khaled's own words, "If it does good for my cause, I'd be happy to accept death." On International Women's Day back in 2015, she celebrated another woman, Shadia Abu Ghazaleh, another Popular Front militant who bombed an Israeli bus, framing her as a heroic resistance fighter. On the same platform, she posted that American troops, quote, fighting in imperialist wars are not brave, and accused the U.S. military of, quote, mercilessly slaughtering third world civilians to maintain American hegemony, and separately blamed, quote, white people for creating al-Qaeda. She declared that Tel Aviv shouldn't exist and labeled its residents, quote, occupiers. And in a 2013 post, she casually used the N-word. This new report compounds an earlier scandal in which Douaji was found to have liked Instagram posts celebrating the October 7, 2023 Hamas massacre in real time, including one dismissing the New York Times investigation into sexual violence as a, quote, mass rape hoax. To top it off, Mamdani and Douaji hosted Hamas-supporting activist Mahmoud Khalil at Gracie Mansion, and Douaji contributed artwork to an essay by author Susan Abulhawa, who has publicly compared Jews to cockroaches and vampires. When confronted, Mayor Mamdani just blew it off. He called his wife a private citizen, private individual with no formal role in his administration. But with each new revelation, that defense is wearing thinner and thinner. Needless to say, this compiling evidence paints a very troubling portrait of the First Lady of America's largest city, someone who, in her own words and likes, celebrated designated terrorists, cheered a mass atrocity, and dismissed documented war crimes as a hoax, and denigrated American troops using racial slurs to boot, and whose husband's only answer to that is to look the other way. I guess we know who's in charge. Now, at the very same time, this scandal surrounding his wife isn't the only crisis bearing down on Mayor Mamdani. He's simultaneously losing a very public battle with the Trump administration over immigration, a defining issue of his tenure. An immigration judge has officially ordered the deportation of Rubio Bojorquez, a 53-year-old Venezuelan national who was employed as a data analyst for the New York City Council, a man Mamdani and City Council Speaker Julie Menin championed as a law-abiding public servant being wrongfully persecuted. The Department of Homeland Security, of course, tells a very different story. DHS has identified Rubio Borges as a criminal illegal alien who entered the United States on a tourist visa back in 2017, who was required to leave that same year, but decided to overstay his visa by nearly a decade. He had no work authorization and carries a prior arrest for assault, despite having signed an attestation for a city council job claiming he had never been arrested. He was detained in January when ICE arrested him at what was supposed to be a routine asylum appointment in Long Island, and Mamdani is raging over this. He's saying this is an absolute assault on our democracy, and he called Rubio a dedicated public servant with legal authorization to remain in the country, even though that is blatantly not true. Now, this deportation order is being seen as a direct rebuke of Mamdani's aggressive posture against the Trump administration on immigration. He's already signed Executive Order number 13, barring city agencies from sharing data with federal immigration authorities, and distributed 30,000 flyers with the title Know Your Rights in order to shield immigrants from ICE. Basically, what just happened with this deportation order is that the mayor, who has made sanctuary city protections a cornerstone of his identity, just watched a judge side with the federal government over his own staff member ally. And it comes at the worst possible moment, just as revelations about his wife's glorification of terrorists and celebration of the October 7th massacre are dominating the headlines. So together, these twin controversies paint a picture of a mayor under siege on two fronts: his personal life, exposing deeply troubling sympathies at home, and his political agenda suffering embarrassing defeats in court. But there's something even deeper and more consequential at work here, something that is a very real threat to our republic that we're going to have to understand if we're going to eradicate it once and for all. And that is exactly what we're about to find out. But first, we are living through a time when a lot of people are beginning to realize something really important. The old economic system, the one that told you, work harder, grind longer, and depend on institutions that frankly don't have your best interests in mind, it's starting to break down, pretty obviously so. You see it everywhere: inflation, instability, and a growing sense that the system is increasingly designed for the benefit of a very small group at the top. And whenever we see moments like this historically, something interesting happens. Ordinary people begin looking for ways to create independence from the system rather than depend on it. And that's why I want to invite you to a free live training with someone I know personally, a good friend of mine named Ryan. And Ryan's been quietly building what he calls the perfect lifestyle business. And what's fascinating about it is that it's probably not what you think of when you hear of online business, right? In fact, when he first explained it to me, I'll be honest, it sounded, frankly, a little weird. But then he showed me the results, and I immediately got excited because it's working so well right now in 2026. And the part that really caught my attention, it takes him, get this, less than 30 minutes a day to actually run and operate. You heard that right, 30 minutes. And the best part is it's so different from a lot of the other online businesses out there because there's no advertising. There's no social media marketing. There's no employees, no inventory, no websites, no need to worry about AI, none of the complicated things most online businesses depend on, which is why most people have never even heard of it. But in this upcoming live training, Ryan's going to walk through how this unusual business model works and why he believes it's one of the simplest lifestyle and most effective businesses available today. So if you'd like to see exactly how this business works, just go to perfectbiz.com/Turley and register. Again, that's perfectbiz.com/Turley. Seats are limited and registration is filling quickly. So if you're curious about generating extra income, this perfect lifestyle business model that Ryan's been quietly using for over 2 decades might just be the right fit for you. Go ahead and grab your spot right now at perfectbiz.com/Turley. Mamdani.com/Turley. To understand why all of this feels so consistent, the wife who cheers for terrorists, the mayor who shields criminal illegal aliens from deportation, the reflexive hostility to American power, you need to understand the intellectual framework driving Zoran Mamdani and his wife. And it's what's known as third worldism. There's an excellent piece by the Hudson Institute's Zineb Rabua entitled The Third Worldist Logic, which I highly recommend for all of you. And Rabua argues that Mamdani is not an Islamist per se. He's not a communist per se. But he is something the American political system really has never quite encountered before. He's a politician formed entirely by third worldist post-colonial theory. So you might be asking, what the heck is that, right? Well, post-colonial theory is a cultural Marxist ideology born in Paris, Algiers, Havana. It was incubated in American graduate schools, of course, and it's now running the largest city in the United States. It's a worldview that divides all of human reality into a single fixed moral binary. That's the key with all Marxist ideological flavors, right? They're always centered on a moral binary between oppressor and oppressed. But for post-colonial third worldists, that binary is centered on the West and Western civilization as the permanent oppressor. And anyone arrayed against Western power, they are inherently righteous, right? Because they are fighting back against that oppression. So it's why Douagi could look at a woman who hijacked airplanes and threatened to blow herself up and see her as a heroine. It's why she could watch 1,200 people massacred on October 7th and hit like. It's why Mamdani can look at a Venezuelan national with a fraudulent employment record here illegally and a history of assault and see a dedicated public servant being victimized by American imperialism. Or blame what he just did a couple of weeks back, blame an attempted terrorist bombing by an avowed ISIS sympathizer on white supremacy. The model decides everything in advance. That binary, that oppressor versus oppressed binary decides everything in advance. Once Israel is cast as a settler colonial extension of the American empire, Palestinian violence, it doesn't just become excusable, it becomes morally obligatory. Once U.S. immigration enforcement is framed as racial domination, protecting any illegal alien from deportation becomes an act of resistance. The facts no longer matter, only the narrative. And that's what makes this moment so important. This is not a story about a mayor whose wife posted some controversial tweets. It's not a story about one Venezuelan data analyst facing deportation. This is a story about an ideology that's quietly marched from the universities into the halls of power. And it's now governing New York City. It's an ideology that cannot recognize October 7th as an atrocity, because doing so would force it to acknowledge that its oppressor-oppressed binary is a bunch of nonsense. It's an ideology that can't enforce immigration law because sovereignty itself is just another word for settler colonialism. It's an ideology that looks at the United States, at everything this nation has built, sacrificed, and stood for, and sees nothing but an empire deserving to be dismantled. Zoran Mamdani did not come out of nowhere. He's the product of decades of intellectual rot that I saw firsthand in the universities. And he now sits in Gracie Mansion with the full power of America's greatest city behind him, while his wife's social media tells you everything you need to know about what they both actually believe. New York City deserves better. America deserves better. And it starts with naming what we're actually dealing with. It's only then that we can together make sure that this cultural Marxist cult stops now.